Okay, good morning, everyone, and thanks for attending this part of the summit. I had the pleasure of being joined on stage with Matt McVicker, as well as Karyn Johnson. Matt works at T-Mobile and Karyn at Optimedia, and I'm Tom Kelly. I'll be moderating this panel, and I am a sales director with advertising.com. So SIC asked us to put together a panel, and they told us that the theme, or one of the themes, was game changers. And if you're wondering what the very ambiguous title of our event is, Navigating the Modern Digital Landscape, it's something that ties really well into what the theme of the overall conference is. And that is, if you're familiar with the kind of web advertising 2.0 or the Terry Kawaja-Messi slide, our space has become very segmented. There are various different media and technology partners out there, such as DSPs, DMPs, SSPs, ad servers, and the list goes on. And although these technologies have been around for some of them for years, some of them for the last 18 months or so, we haven't really seen, we've seen lots of people test these technologies. We've seen people go on about their day and run pretty typical media plans and test a DSP on the side, or test a DMP on the side, or perhaps do a couple of tests with dynamic banners. And many of you in the crowd have probably participated in similar tests of your own. But I think when I saw T-Mobile's media plan and upfront for 2013, it was very interesting to me because it took an entirely different shift. And instead of just incorporating a DMP on the side or a SSP on the side, it actually was kind of web advertising 2.0 centric. And what I mean by that is, I mean it was truly a strategy that was built from the ground up, that was entirely based around this new plethora of various different technologies that we have. So lots of people were familiar with these technologies, and I think lots of people have tested these technologies, but we've seen very few media plans that were really web advertising 2.0 centric. That was until we saw T-Mobile's plan. And the other thing is I think lots of people are interested in trying these various different technologies, and lots of people are aware of them, and they hear about them at conferences. But when it comes down to putting the pen to the paper and creating a media plan and inking it out, I think what lots of people have discovered is there's no real set of rule books out there, and there's not many people that have successfully pulled it off. So the goal of our panel today is to tell you a little bit about the efforts that T-Mobile and Opti have put into their media plan for 2013, to share a little bit about the things that they've learned in doing this process, and hopefully let you in the audience learn a little bit about what has worked, what hasn't worked, so that you can take those things back and perhaps create a web advertising 2.0 plan of your own. So I'd like to kick it off. So, first of all, I think, Karyn and Matt, your plan for 2013 is quite different than your plan for 2012 or in years past. What has it been about the year 2013 or this current state of the media business that has allowed you to feel comfortable in placing all your bets in this new approach? And why do you think that's happening now instead of last year?
For us, we have this saying, it's kind of cheesy, but it's been the theme of 2012, is it's evolution on the way to revolution. So for us in 2012, it was really about, how do we have smarter media and how do we get there? And so with the emergence of all these different platforms, whether it's, automated buying, dynamic creative, a DMP, attribution modeling, all those have really allowed us to get closer to having smarter media. And I think the tipping point for us this past year, hopefully Matt agrees, is that with our DR campaign, we consolidated our media buy. So we had over 10 different networks on our DR buy, and we actually consolidated to a couple partners to make sure that we were optimizing to real-time behavior instead of just run-of-network. So we wanted to make sure we didn't have any audience overlap and that we weren't artificially bidding against ourselves. So by consolidating to a few partners, we were successful in doing that. We were able to get more volume, be more efficient, and I think convince T-Mobile that, hey, when we're putting all this together, it's it's actually working. We're not just talking about this, but we're getting true results.
Yeah, we're largely just learning along the way, as I think any advertiser is. But at T-Mobile, we have a value that we say, go big and stay scrappy. Always do things fewer, bigger, better. And so I think this finally, next year, our digital's coming around to that and really aligning with what we tried to do, not just in media, but as a company, to do things smarter and to focus on the big bets.
Thank you. So it's something that I've heard time and time again, which is this concept of actually doing more with less. I actually held a conference 2 weeks ago, and that was actually the entire theme. And I think it's interesting that in this modern landscape, there's tons of different partners, and lots of people are trying to kind of work with all the different partners. But I think in many situations, what people are seeing value in is consolidation. And what the consolidation allows you to do is to kind of see a larger picture of your overall media buy. I think it allows you to, we'll talk a little bit about this later, but manage things like cookie pools and things like that and duplication a little bit more effectively. So the strategy this year for 2013, how was it created? Was it something that was it agency-centric, or was it advertiser-centric, or was it something you powwowed together about for quite a long time before kind of unleashing it?
I guess I'll take it. I think it was really both. T-Mobile and Optimedia, we have a very close relationship. I think probably closer than a lot of advertiser to agency setups. So it's really built around, I think, the need for more consumer-focused strategy. We've traditionally kind of looked at the purchase funnel as most do, awareness through purchase, but we really designed it to focus on a consumer journey. And it felt like this was really the time to step back, try something new. And so I think we formulated the strategy together, but a lot of the thought leadership really came out of Karyn and her team in terms of how we tactically bring that to life. What are the different partners we want to use, and when and how we want to roll it out.
And I'd just add, from a process perspective, it was a lot different this year because it wasn't selling through a media plan. It was a lot of education, not only with Matt's team in media, but also the different business owners, the web team over at T-Mobile. So it was, really more about educating them, understanding not only what is this going to do for you, but how much bandwidth is this going to take from you, what resources, do we need from you. I think Matt could have a side job as a paralegal because he's done so much legal this year in getting, all this stuff, put together.
Which is exactly why we're hiring a position right now, so if anyone is interested. You can take some work off my plate.
You made that sound so glamorous.
Shameless plug, I love it. Okay, so before we get in any further about some detailed questions, Karyn, could you describe a little bit about what the key differences are in 2013 over 2012 and how your media plan looks without getting into anything too proprietary or strategic? Can you tell the crowd a little bit just about how it's different and kind of what the philosophy is?
Sure. So I think, coming off of the potential merger from AT&T last year, we found ourselves in the space again of we are a challenger brand. We need to make our every dollar count, our media work harder, make sure we have no media waste. So for us, it's really been the focus on big data and how we approach the consumer journey. So, before we'd been very linear in terms of our everyone's seen the sales funnel, so been very linear in terms of our different media. And this year we're really focused on the connective tissues amongst the funnel, how all big data is working together across paid, owned, and earned.
And part of your strategy this year was to really, for the first time, utilize a DMP to put a management platform around all this data. And if you're going big data, you really need a platform to handle that. What was that DMP shopping process like, and what were the key differences that you found in different partners, and why could you ultimately go with the partner that you did?
So for us, when we were looking at the different DMPs, I think first we looked at historical data. So we knew that the advantage of a DMP is going to be to combine both third and first party data. So looking at third party data, we looked back at historical performance to see what really has been driving results. From there, it's more about efficiencies. So we're fortunate to be part of Viviki and be able to leverage the relationship we have there and the rates there, looking at their preferred partners and their evaluations. And then on top of that, it was, we want to roll this out pretty fast. We want to do some, some tests on our way forward. And so who has relationships with our preferred vendors so we can have the, their databases, their server-to-server match. So those were kind of I would say the big three was just in terms of the breadth of their data, the rates, the historical overall relationship.
Yeah, and a lot of that really amounts to, on our side, just the scalability of it. Who's the largest partner, who has the most to offer? I think just being a 52-week advertiser, you want to have that scale, you want to have that sustainability. So as all of those technical aspects, but then also who has the breadth, who has the coverage to really get in front of the most eyeballs.
Were any of those factors that you were shopping around for out of the three, were any of them more limiting than others? In other words, did a certain one of those qualities really stand out as the kind of unique value proposition? Like were lots of them aligned with all your partners, and did lots of them have wide breadth, or what was the characteristic that really kind of singled one out?
For me, I think it wasn't just one factor, it was a combination of all. I can picture in my head right now the chart that we looked at that had all of these different factors, and basically, you have partners on one side and all the criteria at the top, and really checking them off. So it wasn't, it was somewhat of a scientific approach to see just who can do what, but at the end of the day, it was us working with Optimedia to really discuss the full evaluation, and go forward with a partner from there. I don't feel like it was one single characteristic.
Yeah, I would agree.
When taking a sort of more audience buying approach, are you going to continue to use the historical metrics that you've used for DR, which is essentially, sort of cost per plan, or are you going to be shifting that to kind of accommodate for a audience-centric approach as opposed to a direct response, or are those one and the same?
I think a lot of that is TBD. As you've talked about, we're doing a lot of things at once, so it's going to be learning what works best and how to optimize. So I think what we'd like to see is to let the new funnel and optimization path define itself and kind of go from there. But certainly there's always a role for acquisition-based media, where we want, efficient two-year contracts, efficient prepaid plans. But it's also filling the top of the funnel. So we certainly have metrics we use today to measure awareness and consideration and moving people down. But I think a lot of it is largely just to be determined in terms of how we're going to optimize that whole customer journey. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I would say that's fair. I mean, I think, we're looking at it from, as Matt spoke about, with the bottom of the funnel, like maybe expanding beyond CPA just to look at efficiency metrics, make sure we're still, driving traffic to the site. But then as we move up the funnel, beyond looking at yield, we're talking, I know we're going to get into that with the attribution model, but also just other, key indicators in terms of social indicators. So I think our big thing is, even with digital, looking across our mediums for all of our T-Mobile media, is how do we have that ongoing test and learn path throughout the year, instead of just looking at our upfront and waiting till the end of the year to see if that works. What's that constant feedback loop that we can look at, whether it's looking at bluefin data, social data to see what TV programs are working. So we have a lot of different thoughts that we're trying to put together this year.
Sure, of course. So both of you mentioned the funnel, and I think the funnel is an interesting topic because one could argue that part of this web advertising 2.0 comes the destruction of that funnel, right? So there's, historically over the last couple of years, lots of people have looked at the funnel. Everyone's probably seen it on tons of presentations. There's upper, some people have middle, I think historically T-Mobile has, and then lower. But research has shown that people don't really use or shop using a funnel at all. It's more of a customer journey. Some people may start their discovery process in a store, and then they may go back to a computer at home and do a search for it on Google. Other people may be exposed to a new product for the first time via TV ad and then go right to a store. In your 2013 plan, how are you kind of redefining what that funnel looks like, and do you feel that funnel is no longer really a accurate mechanism for T-Mobile to do their media buying upon?
I think, we're not stepping away from the funnel altogether. We're just making it more actionable and making sure that we're not looking at it from such a linear basis. So looking at it in terms of, again, what are those connective tissues? And I think, as you spoke about before, we have had very definitive campaigns for each part of the funnel. We had, supporting different devices or offers for awareness. We had an evergreen shopping campaign that really focused on, as users are researching and shopping online, a lot of them are purchasing in store, but we wanted to make sure we had that presence presence to make sure they were considering T-Mobile. And then we had our DR campaign at the bottom of the funnel. I think the issue that we've come to realize this year, the pain point of the funnel and the consumer journey is that, someone could have entered at the top, seen one of our hero devices, a GS3, then they see our network message as they go through, go on CNET, and then they're re-messaged at the bottom of the funnel through AOD, and they're receiving a free phone message. So it's just a bad user flow. So for looking at that consumer journey, we're trying to look at it more holistically to say, okay, maybe we have two re-messaging streams where one is based on re-messaging a free BOGO offer for a hero device to someone who's seen the hero creative. So we're not stepping away from it completely, just looking at it differently and making it more actionable.
Yeah, and to take that, I think, a step further, it's also setting up a funnel that's sustainable across different kinds of messages that we want to talk about. Like as Karyn said, sometimes we'll talk about our network and our coverage. Other times it's a certain phone or a rate plan or a free offer. So all of these things have different, they hit the customer in a different way. There's a different consideration set, a different process there. So you can't force all of those messages into one funnel. It's really about having a dynamic funnel to manage, as you talked about, that customer journey.
So ultimately, I think what comes out of the funnel in terms of measuring success online is an attribution model that is, historically dependent upon last view or last click. As part of redefining that funnel, are you finding yourselves that attribution model is no longer adequate, and are you exploring ways to better identify what success looks like and what is important and what touches are important in a consumer's path to a purchase?
So we decided to use an attribution model this year, just going beyond an ad server and selecting someone that was more chosen. There's rule-based algorithm, or there's a rules-based attribution model and an algorithmic-based attribution model. So for T-Mobile, we serve millions and billions of impressions each year, and so for us, it was looking at the factors in terms of our media, evaluating our media, and knowing that recency is really important for us because we have such a huge reach. Sequencing is also really important for us. So as we move to evaluating media, we also have to think of, we have all these channels, not only our paid media, our, owned and earned. How are we evaluating all of this together and deduping our audience? So we went through a selection process, another RFP process with attribution vendors, and we landed on a vendor that was really more about, it's an algorithmic-based model, so it's focused on allowing looking at the dynamic sequence of each of the conversions. So we're not just giving credit to that last view or last click, but it's also unique to each conversion. And I think, we always joke that our analytics director, his favorite saying is, "There's no guidebook to this. There's no rule book." So we're kind of figuring this out, I should say, as we go along. But I think the important thing at the attribution model that we selected is we have access to the log files, the raw data, so we can get insight into those sequences and kind of figure out, okay, what levers are we looking at and what really is that secret sauce to drive gross ads.
Yeah, and it's not only the media that Karyn and her team are managing, it's also the other agencies that we work with, or our affiliates and email campaigns, or even how the website itself performs. So it's taking all those other different touch points and adding them to the mix, whereas before, even with a traditional attribution model, you may just be looking at your own media plan, but there's so many other messages that consumers are receiving from you that it's important to take that into account as well.
So we've changed some things. We've changed the way that we're measuring data or accounting for data. You've changed the way that you are actually attributing to conversions. It sounds like you've been pretty busy over the last couple of months. I'm sure it was a pretty grueling upfront process. One of the things that Opti and T-Mobile has always done a little bit differently is I think that lots of marketers in their head, when they think of branding, they think of premium, kind of owned and operated direct placements. And when marketers think of DR, they think of using non-reserved media. I know that in many cases, you've used non-reserved for branding, and perhaps you've used reserved inventory for DR. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of how you view that space and how you've broken out of that traditional kind of playbook where people are going for certain types of partners for one effort or the other?
So for us, we have used ad networks for branding. Specifically, in the wireless space, it's so competitive. There's a lot of OEMs that are advertising as well. So again, looking at a hero campaign like the GS3, there's a ton of people out there advertising the same phone across all the carriers. So for us, it's really important just to be like, okay, well, we as T-Mobile, we have that as well, and this is the difference. This is why you want to go with us. So we want to get as much reach as possible and efficiently. So you're familiar, we've done the billion block on AOL, but I think it's really a matter of how you purchase the inventory. So, we've evolved over the years in making sure we've only bought above the fold inventory. We're only buying the larger sizes, on that network. So we're getting a huge reach in 3 days and really getting awareness quickly when we're trying to launch, a campaign. So typically we've used branding for devices. It's kind of like a movie launch. You got to get the reach out there fast. And I think also we've done a lot of net blocks with ad networks that's really focused, again, on getting that reach out there quickly, but it's the way you buy it. So unlike DR, we're making sure, okay, well, we're only on the top 500 ComScore site. So we're looking at viewability, making sure the impression's seen 50% of the time for 1 second. So I think the tactics that you apply to that media, and then it allows us to be efficient for our brand campaign as well.
I think it's dead on. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where we really just want to have a few key partners and do things well in the areas that we're in. So when you can do both branding initiatives and DR initiatives, through one partner, maybe similar inventory sources, as an agency, it gives you more leveraging power, more buying power to say, hey, gave you these brand dollars, can you give us a break on the places where maybe efficiency matters more? So it's being able to establish those relationships with the publishers to, I think, do multiple things with similar inventory sources.
And for those of you that aren't aware, I'm not sure billion block may be kind of a proprietary term, but a billion block is it's similar to a net block, but it's the quantity of impressions is literally you're serving 1 billion impressions in a relatively short period of time, a couple of days. So it's a pretty large branding blast that goes out, which T-Mobile has used pretty successfully for product launches. So after you do one of these, how are you evaluating the success of that? What's kind of the primary metric where you go back to your partners and you say, hey, we just executed a huge buy with you. It was okay, it was below par, or it was fantastic. What are those attributes that you look for?
You're talking about running a large buy, like a billion block specifically?
Yeah, or a net block. I don't know, maybe they're the same, maybe they're different.
Yeah, usually for us, it's when we're putting out a big campaign like that or a big buy, it's all about awareness. So it really amounts to, for us, landing page yield, getting them to a particular page within T-Mobile.com. If it's a new phone like the Galaxy S3, it's getting them to that page. So it's really a measurement of that yield against both historic campaigns as well as other partners within that same buy.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add to that.
So obviously T-Mobile's been a pretty active partner with AOD, which is the trading desk. Yet I think you haven't used AOD in a mutually exclusive fashion than working with various different ad networks or exchanges. Can you describe a little bit about how you approach that and how you make sure that the AOD plus the non-reserved media partners that you work with are working together collaboratively as opposed to just kind of adding clutter to the mix? And what have you found that each one is more effective at?
Well, I'd say with AOD, it's great because it gets us a better seat at the table for bids for the inventory, and it also allows us to get frequency across the different exchanges. But at the same time, we can't limit ourselves to that. So, for instance, we do a buy with Amazon, who's sitting on a gold mine of data and also manages their own DSP. So we have our buy separately that we manage with them. There's no overlap in terms of the audience. And same thing, we strategically look at the different, with what AOD is buying in the exchanges versus our networks to make sure that we're not duplicating the inventory source is number one. I would say, that the advantage of AOD, again, is the frequency and better see the table, where the networks, it's guaranteeing delivery. So especially as we're using it for a brand campaign, it's efficient for us, and we're making sure we have those important guaranteed impressions. The last thing I would say is, the one advantage we found with the networks is, Matt was alluding to earlier, they might be willing to go upside down for us to on their margin, so to be really efficient on the network media, because they know they're going to make it up by getting some more branding dollars. Where someone like an AOD in the real-time bidding, we don't have that advantage, so the rates can be a little different. So it's balancing those two out.
Are there any lines in the sand that you've drawn around AOD or around exchanges or various different network partners where you kind of dictate, hey, we want you to play in this space, and we're going to kind of limit yourself to playing in this space to manage overall frequency? Any guidelines that you give to them, or is it just run each as efficiently as possible, and you kind of let them compete against one another?
I think it's probably more of the latter. We like to test a lot of things and test a lot of partners. There's certain, networks, certain inventory sources that obviously perform better than others for different kinds of campaigns. But I don't think we silo publishers or partners too much. We try to let them have a hand in a lot of different campaigns and see how they perform, and really optimize from there. But yeah, as new plans come up, you'll typically see similar partners on them. And it's because that they perform well in that space. But I don't think it's so much us dictating that. It's really their performance kind of defining how we move forward with each partner.
One of the things that was different about TMO's 2013 plan from years past is that this year, TMO has taken a pretty direct approach to buying data, whereas historically, lots of times you would lean on your network partners to go out and buy third-party data on your behalf, and then kind of combine that or pair that with media. Can you explain the reason behind that change, and maybe what some of the advantages or perceived advantages of doing that are?
I think part of it was just driven by what we wanted to do as a business. It was our target audience changing a bit and becoming a bit more refined. Yes, we're a national carrier, so we have to talk to everyone, but we can talk to a few key people a bit differently. So I was wanting to find that one-on-one data relationship to be able to do that. Part of establishing that relationship is just eliminating that middleman, essentially. It's having our hands on the controls, not going to the partners and telling them what we want, but actually going in and setting what we want. So one, it's an efficiency play in that those margins from the middle are kind of taken out, and we have that one-on-one relationship. But it's also tighter control, in that we're really sitting there, pulling the levers by ourselves, and not relying on a partner to do it for us.
Yeah, it's really just an efficiency and having more insight to the target instead of relying on the partners.
And could you describe some of the advantages of having that control? So I think in the past, when you're not buying your data directly, it's hard to kind of count. Am I buying overlapping data sources? Am I giving proprietary T-Mobile data to partners and then kind of losing control of what happens to that data after that? Has part of this kind of change been to protect your data and to kind of get a better handle on cookie overlap and the potential to be bidding against yourself in an exchange?
I think it's really just more about having that immediate control. One, I think the advantage of having that relationship is just timing. If something comes up on the T-Mobile end, we can go to Karyn's team and say, hey, we need to reach this audience for this reason, and we can quickly go into our own system and set it up. It's not all the back and forth of talking to the different partners that we have. So a lot of it, I think, is just the benefit of timing. It's one, the cost efficiency, but also the efficiency of time.
I'd agree.
One of the things that you've experimented with over the last year has been implementing dynamic ads, which is clearly another big item on the Terry Kawaja slide of kind of web advertising 2.0. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience in implementing those ads, the benefits you've seen, and how you pick those partners?
Yeah, again, I think it's letting the customer journey define itself to us rather than trying to pigeonhole it and define it. So by having that dynamic creative, dynamic messaging, it's really allowed us to just see what works well. Maybe it's a certain phone, it's a certain message or offer that we didn't expect to do well, but it's actually clicking and it's converting. I think it aligns to our overall strategy of doing a lot of things at once, putting a lot out there and seeing what sticks, and then driving that forward.
I would say, also just like with a web team we work closely with, before we would get in a situation where they'd have a 1 to 3 day sale and we couldn't get that creative ready in time. So outside of just from a performance perspective, it's allowed us to be a lot more flexible, test a lot more, and be a lot more relevant in terms of our offers.
And this kind of ties in this question with one of the questions before it. So how have you found that working with the dynamic banner providers is different when working with reserved, network media, and then AOD? Are they certain situations or partners that excel when working with your dynamic banner vendor, or is it implemented pretty much in the same fashion across the board?
I think it's been pretty seamless in terms of, across vendors from a dynamic perspective. I would say, if you're looking at AOD compared to networks, or just in general with networks, the one advantage that we've really pushed our partners for this year is, hey, we want to run rich media for a branding campaign. So talking about we've been utilizing networks for branding. We want to run rich media, but we can't afford the ad serving fees for all of that. So we've been really aggressive in terms of making the publishers, they really love us this year in terms of taking the data in-house and the rich media, but of having them cover the rich media fees as well. So it's been great in terms of we've been able to test a lot more rich media capabilities. So outside of the dynamic, just also have a more engaging creative.
And the results of this experiment that you've been doing for the last year, have they been positive? And is this something you're committed to and is going to continue to be part of the plan for 2013?
Yeah, absolutely. Digital continues to grow in terms of just our overall media mix. One, because that's where people are going, but also because I think we've done it well. We've had a lot of success with it. So yes, definitely going to continue on the path that we're on. We're kicking off attribution, kicking off big data. So there's still a lot to be learned, but I think we're on the right path. We're seeing the results that we want to see. And we're all kind of, media nerds, I think, at heart. And so we all just want to learn this and do it, really get down into the weeds of it.
And unlike some online retailers or solely bricks and mortar retailers, T-Mobile has an interesting situation because you have thousands of retail stores across the U.S., and that bricks and mortar part of your business has been very important. On the other hand, you have tons of initiative behind your online store. How do you play in that kind of sandbox, and are your online advertising efforts being tied back into success metrics that go back to bricks and mortar, and is that successful for you, or are you kind of unsiloing to the point where you can successfully drive an online ad that potentially leads someone into a store to buy a phone, and is that considered success for you, and are you able to track that at all?
Yeah, so that's really kind of stems the whole reason as to why we need attribution, need smarter data buying, is because the large majority of our business is done in stores. I think that's true for most wireless carriers, in that it's probably 90% plus of your sales are going to happen in your retail channel. I think there's a tendency to always want to make digital work for the web to drive web sales. But if that's not how consumers are behaving, you need to set up your media in a way that can do both. So I think we're going to get away from siloing, this is the direct response plan and this is the branding plan, really letting those things kind of run together, become more seamless, and start defining a new set of KPIs where it's not just an online conversion, it's not just a landing page hit, but it's taking all those things into account, as well as people looking for a T-Mobile store is always a key indicator for us. Did they type in their zip code to find the nearest retailer? So taking all of those different touch points, kind of boiling them together and see what comes out on the other end. Once we define what that is, start optimizing against that new blended metric.
I'd say, just to add, in terms of tracking, there's a couple different things we look at. We have a mixed media model across the board, so it evaluates not just digital, but all our media and how that's doing and driving our gross ads in store and online. And then outside of that too, for digital, we've been kind of spitballing back and forth with Matt in terms of what are different things we can do from a organization perspective to help with that tie-in in stores. A lot of times just from, we're like, oh, coupons, we could do this and that, but it's just not possible right now with stores. So even exploring and, learning best practices in terms of sending users their receipt, via email, and then when they open that up, being able to cookie them to be able to tie their sale in store to our efforts online. So all stuff that we're trying to explore as well.
Right. That's great insight, because I think it's so important. If you think back to your university days, I think one of the things that you learn in your first marketing class or Marketing 101 is that marketing is all about a marketing mix, where there's various different efforts that contribute to the success or failure of a campaign. But as soon as we get into the industry, I think too often we become siloed, and so many people, their success is evaluated on only one portion of that media mix. And I think some of the things that you're doing to kind of account for that holistic attribution and to break down those silos is very intelligent and gets very much back to kind of what the heart of this new landscape is. So I think that's really good for you guys. How far are you in that implementation? Is that something that you're kind of dipping your toe into, or is that something that's kind of locked and loaded and you're going to be launching in January, January 1st of 2013 with?
We're really trying to do all as quickly as we can. Because a lot of it is brand new and we want to, there's a lot of data involved. We want to, obviously protect our customers' data, things like that. So there's a lot of internal hoops to jump through with privacy and legal and getting the web team on board, those kind of things. But yeah, we're full steam ahead and really just want to get things going as soon as we can.
Hence your paralegal status, I guess.
Yes, exactly. I'm charging $200 an hour to be here, so.
I mean, the great thing about the DMP is it's something, it has different points that we can use. So we've been able to already leverage the third-party data. We've been able to look at our web data and, segment those users out. Now we're more focused on the CRM and first-party data, which is where more of the legal comes in. I would say one thing we haven't talked about, too, that's been really helpful this year is a tag management solution. So that's something we also implemented. Just, we always had issues going back and forth with tags being removed and us not knowing about it. And, all sorts of fun on that front. So having a tag management solution has also helped us be able to implement the DMP.
So it's interesting you talk about tag management. I know that one of the reasons why you actually use a dynamic banner vendor is that not only do you get the benefits of having dynamic banners and increasing click-through rates and things like that, but one of the things that's been key for you is that it's actually it's become your creative management platform. And that's become very important to you, much like a tag management platform may kind of take care of remove a lot of the minutia of placing and removing tags. Can you tell us a little bit about how your dynamic banner partner has become kind of your central media planning platform for you guys?
In terms of the dynamic creative, they're certainly very valuable, I think more in the DR space. Whereas Karyn talked about earlier, it's when we have a lot of new phones, a lot of new offers. Maybe sometimes it's an offer that's only valid for 12 hours. So you need that quick turnaround time to put it live. So dynamic, I think, always has a place where it's fast turnaround. The message is relatively simple and similar to something you've done before. So it allows us to get it out more quickly. But there's always room for the more custom units, the more custom banners. Sometimes the message is a bit more complex when you're talking about things like unlimited data and you want to compare that against your competition. There's a dynamic banner can only go so far in trying to jam that message into it. So the dynamic, I think, is really important when it's a more simple message. It's something that we do with a more cadenced approach. But there's certainly times where we have to create our own banners, own message when it's a bit more complex or a bit more premium.
We are, outside of dynamic creative, looking at partners within mobile and video as well, just from a bandwidth perspective and getting, we have been very TV-centric advertiser. And so, a lot of our schedule in terms of our creative readiness is based on the TV shoot. So how do we take that video and get that out there and leverage that upper funnel, lower funnel, is looking at some of the creative solutions that are out there now in terms of getting video into your creative faster and also with mobile.
So just to highlight a little bit about what that looks like on the back end. So years ago, if T-Mobile were to come out with a new phone or to, potentially run out of stock on a product or to come out with a new commercial, and they needed to update creative online quickly, they'd have to call the, dozen or so partners they worked with, and all the creative would have to be re-trafficked, and there would be, at best a couple of hours or perhaps a couple of days lag time in between when the creative was sent and when it actually appeared online. And it was a lot of work not only for T-Mobile and the agency, but also for the media partners that were receiving all those instructions. With the new media platform they're on, they can basically log into one consolidated system, upload creative, and then all of a sudden, all those creative are near instantly live across all their different partners, which makes things super efficient. I know that's been important for them. So we're nearing the end of our time here, and I wanted to make sure that one of the goals was really to take some of the learnings that both Optimedia has done and T-Mobile has done in getting to this web advertising 2.0 space and potentially share some of those learnings with you. So I wanted to open up some questions to the crowd for these two. If has anyone kind of attempted similar feats and gotten stuck or ran into challenges? No one?
I had a question on your attribution model. You mentioned incorporating affiliate email. Are you also doing that with search?
Yeah, it's both paid search. The question was, if you didn't hear, we're building out the attribution model. Are we also including search within it? Absolutely paid search, organic search as well. It really is all the different touch points that we're able to manage we want to put into it. The challenge in doing that is it sounds simple up front, but internally you have different business owners who obviously own and manage all those different pieces of the business. So it's also getting their sign-off to hand over at least partial control of their tracking to a team that they're not intimately involved in. So for us, the SEO team isn't part of our organization structure. The web team isn't. The affiliates team isn't. So it's establishing a relationship with all of those people and really selling in why the model is important for not only media, but also for their business. So yes, search we definitely want to add in and we'll be adding in, but it's also all the other touch points that you mentioned.
So for right now, have you just been primarily using it to optimize the way
Yeah. Right now it's just being built out. So our attribution model isn't yet actionable. I think just signed the contract a couple of weeks ago. So we've been funneling them a lot of data for a while, but we've yet to set it up and start using it for optimization. So that's TBD.
And I think in terms of implementation, that brings up a good point. And those of you who have not tested attribution modeling may not know, but there's a pretty lengthy process involved. Usually the first step of that process after you evaluate partners and sign contracts is there's a data dump process where you give that vendor access to all your data. And then if you're using an algorithmic approach, they actually have to ingest that data for a couple of weeks before they can start to get a good idea for the kind of flow, the ebb and flow of your customers and which impressions and which touch points are actually driving lift. So they're in that phase right now, having only signed the contract a couple of weeks ago. But if you're thinking about getting into an attribution model play, know that it's a pretty lengthy process to get involved with. I think we had another question in the back.
You answered some of it right there. I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how you vetted the companies for your attribution solution.
Sure. So we went through an RFP process, and again, for us, the important part was really having visibility we were more focused on algorithmic, so we wanted to make sure, we looked at it in terms of a weighted scale. So as Matt mentioned that grid earlier, same grid for algorithmic. We had all the partners, and we put different weight levels, so it was somewhat scientific in terms of the different levers that were important to us. Definitely transparency into the data for the algorithmic, and the sequencing was important for probably the two main factors for us.
Yeah, I think you asked the question earlier about the DMP and was there one single factor that really set us to choose one. I don't think it was necessarily true for DMP, but for the attribution vendor, I think it was more important. It was that transparency piece and really having the access to that raw data so that Karyn's team and the analytics team can really go through there and kind of kick the tires on it and make sure that it's valid. What we didn't want to do is sign with an attribution vendor just to say we now have an attribution model. If they have something that's U-based or rules-based, that's not solving the problem that we put out there. It's wanting to make sure that their model and information is going to work for the problem that we had. So having the access to that transparent information, I think, was most important in the evaluation.
And really to have more transparency into what is affecting the media, and instead of using it just from a measurement platform, to also be able to inform us how to plan moving forward.
And I think that point about rules-based versus algorithm-based is really important, and it's a point that I think is sometimes lost. And for those that don't know, in the attribution modeling space, there's kind of two types of vendors. One is it says, well, we've traditionally been valuing last touch and last click. We're going to allow you to redefine what that looks like. So we're going to give the first impression, or often called the introductory impression, we're going to give them 20% of the valuation. We're going to give the closer impression or the last impression, another 20%, and we're going to split up the remaining 60 kind of throughout the middle. Although that is interesting and a little bit more dynamic than the last touch, it's still arbitrary, which leads me to believe that I would question the value around that. A true algorithmic model actually tells you which impressions are creating lift, and instead of being rules-based, it actually defines who your partners are and which placements and which behaviors are working best for you. And I think, although it's a tougher mountain to climb, I think it's the results of that climb will be a lot more, provide a lot more value to you if you kind of choose to go that route, and be a lot more insightful to how your partners are performing and which tactics are working and which aren't. Any other questions? Okay, well, I'd really like to thank Matt and Karyn for joining me on stage up here today to talk to you all. Have a great rest of the conference.
Thanks.